What is up, guys? I'm Kyle at Fortune, and today's video is the #1 requested topic I've had so far. We're installing a Spartan locker in the front and a Mini-Spool in the rear. Everyone knows installing lockers in your truck is a real game changer. It makes an okay trail rig into an off-road machine. For some reason, people just don't feel comfortable tearing into their differentials, and they don't have confidence that the work they can do will last. In this video, I'm going to show you that anybody can do this, and all it requires is some basic tools, some attention to detail, and a little bit of patience. A lot of people think that a dial indicator is required for installing lunchbox lockers in a Samurai or Toyota axle. It actually isn't a requirement, it's just a great backup. In this video, I'm going to show that you can do this locker install without a dial indicator, although I will be using one at the beginning and the end of the video just to prove that point. Throughout this video, you'll see that my differential is actually upside down. For me, that was just an easier way to work with it. It doesn't seem to want to roll as much, and also the pinion is stuck to the desk, so it's not wanting to spin my ring gear at all. So if you're doing this and following along, just make sure you have your pinion oriented the same way as I do, or you're flipping it around and doing it opposite. All right, we've got the Spartan locker here, and this is it. This is all the parts required to put in there, and you can see it comes with some new replacement pins, so we'll have some spares if we ever need them. Sticker for the coffee mug, installation manual. This is actually a really well done manual. Tells you everything you're going to need. Really good directions, so should be a piece of cake. All right, step 1 is to remove these thrust washers from these side gears. Next, we're going to place one of the side gears in the cap. Spins freely. All right, next we're going to get this bag of these springs and caps, and we're going to put a little bit of grease on the spring, and then we're going to insert each one into its own cap. That grease is going to help the spring stay in there. Now we're just going to put a little bit of grease on the spring side to help that side stay in. Grab 1/2 of the Spartan locker, and we're just going to put spring side down into each one of these holes here. Then we're going to do the same thing with the other side. So each half has these 2 holes and then these 2 little recessed parts. So what we're going to do is line it up so these cross pins are aligned, and each cap will correspond with one of the recessed areas in the opposite part of the Spartan locker. It'll look like that. You can see through both sides. The spring is working. Now we have our second side gear. We're going to place it in the bottom of the carrier housing. I'm going to make sure it's seated and that it spins freely and smoothly. And as per my original plan, I'm going to have the mark on the carrier pointing at the 12 o'clock, and I'm going to just lower the Spartan locker into the carrier that already has the 26 spline side gear on the bottom. Now that those are in there, you're going to want to line up the holes with the holes on the outside of the carrier to make sure those cross pins can go right through. Going to take one of the washers, drop it down into the middle. Next, you'll take the center piece and you'll drop that in on top of the washer. Once again, you're going to line it up with the holes so the cross pins can go through. On top of that, we're going to put in our next washer. So it'll look like that. Next, we'll put in the long cross pin. I'm trying to put them back into the same holes they came out of in the carrier. So for me, that's going to be going this way. Next, the 2 pins on the opposite side. Now I'm not hitting it very hard at all. I just tapped it in with the brass hammer. Now I'm just rubbing my fingers around the outside to see how much they're all sticking out and making sure it's all even around. They're all coming out of the housing the same amount. All right, we already know this side gear fits in the cap well, so we're going to flip it over, lay it down, seat it between, spring loaded. We're going to put the top cap on. It's ready to bolt together. You can see I've got my yellow mark there. I'm going to put it at the 12 o'clock. I've got another mark on the top cap, and I'm going to put them at the same position so all the bolts go back in the way they were, minimizing any change in how I put this back together. All right, for these next parts, I've got two different types of Loctite. I've got the high strength red and the medium strength blue. For the caps on the carrier, we're going to go with blue. All right, I'm going to get these started, tighten them up. We need a 12 millimeter. Now it's time to torque down all of the differential case bolts. The setting is 27 to 32 foot-pounds of torque. 30 foot-pounds of torque is not a lot, but when you're holding on to something as small as this, it can be tricky to hold. So here's what I did. I put one of my rear shafts that I'm not going to be using in a vise. So this is 26 spline. Slid it into the side gear inside the carrier here, and it's locked up, working just as it should. And then tightening them this way, I had enough resistance where I can get 30 foot-pounds, and I was going in a crisscross pattern. All right, now we are lining the case up with the 12 o'clock. We've got the paint stripe on the ring gear. We're going to put that at 12 o'clock. To tighten up these ring gear bolts, we're going to use a 14 millimeter. The torque setting for these ring gear bolts is 58 to 66. Now that everything's back together, I'm just going to go over it and make sure no debris has fallen in there or stuck to any of the old gear oil that was remaining on there. All right, next we're going to put on the bearing caps. These can be tightened down with a 17 millimeter. Now the bearing adjuster caps. So after I put these on and snugged the cap bolts down, I started threading these in, and it's kind of weird. They go in at a different angle than you'd think, but they're supposed to thread in pretty smoothly until they get close. Like this one was right about here, and then I just used some needle nose pliers, spread out, and spun it into position. And I verified that it's in the correct position by lining this tab up on the hole there, and you can see it's dead on. The other side was a little far off, so I had to twist it quite a bit to get it in there. Now I'm just feeling the Backlash just by muscle memory, just feeling of trying to compare it to what it was before, and it feels dead on. So what I can do now is put some marking compound on the ring gear, and I can run it through a few times and see how it's coming out on the teeth. Now it's time to put the bearing lock plate on, and this will get torqued down 7 to 10 foot-pounds. Now it's time for the bearing cap bolts. These are 51 to 72 foot-pounds. As ridiculous as this sounds, I'm throwing an axle shaft in there to get some leverage on this. All right, now we've got some gear marking compound. I'm going to throw this on a few of the teeth and run it a couple revolutions both ways, and we'll see how it looks. All right, I ran the gear through a few more times, and now you can see the pattern a little bit better there. It's nice and centered. Everything looks good. We're going with that. Now it's time to start on the rear differential, and instead of the Spartan locker, this one's going to be getting the spool. Now, in my last video I mentioned how simple spools were. This is why. They're just one solid piece. You know, there's no moving parts in it, and like I said, the axles are essentially fused together. Whatever one does, the other one's gonna do. So it's just a heavy chunk of steel. Some people call them the orb of traction. I don't know. I'm gonna have a better name for it soon after I break my first shaft. This install should be even easier than the Spartan. So after the carrier gets the spool put in it, I'll just speed it up so you don't have to sit through that again. All right, we're setting the spool inside the carrier. It's fully seated and turned smoothly. Now we have the cap. I'm going to throw that on. Also moves smoothly. Go back a second, and now we need to put our cross pins in. Carrier mark is going to 12 o'clock. First cross pin went in from this direction. And now for the two shorts. All locked up. No play at all. It's assembled and ready to go back into the housing. One of the reasons why I don't think a dial indicator is necessary is because of the cost. Even the kit I have was somewhere around $38 when you can actually just get gear marking compound for around $8 or $9. So it's much cheaper. The dial indicator really only shows you how much backlash you have, whereas gear marking compound gives you an overall picture that you can reference online. You can see, this is what my gear pattern looks like. What does it mean? Do I need more backlash? Less? Is my pinion depth messed up? Whatever. All right, now we have the rear put back together with the spool in it. The front's got the Spartan in it. We're ready to put these back in the housing. Because we didn't mess with the pinion at all we have to do is worry about the ring gear, which means the pinion depth shouldn't need to be adjusted, and backlash is the only thing we'll have to worry about. I've seen a dial indicator used in many pictures and a few videos, and I think a lot of the confusion comes from that. In some videos, you'll see that folks have it on the ring gear bolt, some have it on the ring gear. Here's how I set up my dial indicator. So a dial indicator basically measures how much something is moving. The needle here depresses into the gauge, and you can see the dial move. Therefore, the most accurate way to get a reading off a dial indicator is for the moving surface to be at 90 degrees or perpendicular. The most important part of setting up your dial indicator is making sure you're getting a 90-degree angle for the dial indicator needle. The first thing you'll need to do is find the center of your differential. I'm going to be using this piece of wood and drawing an imaginary line to wherever your measuring point is going to be. We'll say we're going to use this ring gear bolt right here. You can barely see the top of it right there. Going from the center of the differential to the mounting point on that ring gear bolt would mean that the dial indicator would need to come in at an angle like this. As you can see, that's a pretty tight area. And another reason why you might not want to use the bolt is that every bolt is oriented a little bit differently. So if you wanted to measure in several places, you probably wouldn't get a very accurate reading. For that reason, my recommendation is to go off the ring gear teeth. Measuring the ring gear backlash in several different places is very helpful when you're setting up new gears. Because we return these gears back to the stock position, we only need to measure in one location. Before I took the differential apart, this is the bolt I used. The spec is 4 to 6 thousandths of an inch. We're going to see what we're at now after reassembling it. You can see the dial indicator needle is coming in very close to 90 degrees from the center of the differential, so the reading should be accurate. We're also hitting the flat side of this bolt right here, so the needle should get a nice perpendicular reading. Here's a better look of where the dial indicator is hitting this bolt. What we'd be measuring with the backlash is how close this ring gear is to the pinion gear down in there. To move the ring gear closer to the pinion, we would loosen this side and tighten this side, pushing the entire carrier this way. We would do the opposite if we wanted to loosen it up. Each one of these circles is about 2 thousandths of an inch. So because we're going with our factory settings where I marked them, there's really no reason for this to be off. And as you'll see in a minute, it's right on the money. With one hand, I'm holding on to the pinion, and the other, I'm going to put some pressure onto the dial indicator, and you can see the needle move there. I put a load on it. It's about 5 right there. Rock it back and forth, and it's at 0. It's hard to hold that pinion still. But from where I'm looking, that looks like about 4.5 thousandths, so right in spec. So there you have it. We have a Spartan locker installed in the front, the Mini-Spool in the rear, and it really wasn't that hard. If you want to see some of the parts and tools that I use for this install, check out the description below. If you have any questions about what I did, think I might have done something wrong, or have something to add, please put it down in the comments to let everyone else know. If you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe. If you do, you'll be able to see all of my new videos as they come out. You can see where this Samurai is headed. Thanks for watching. See you next time.